Yes, it's John G. Sutton here. Tales from the jails. And today I want to talk a little bit about this rather unfortunate and I would say very immature young lady. I'll show you a photograph. Her name is Elise Hibbs. She's now aged 25 and she's just been sentenced to 6 months in prison for inappropriate associations with an inmate. She was a prison nurse. This is her photograph. You can see that. Looks like quite a lovely young lady. She's now serving 6 months imprisonment. She was associating inappropriately with a prisoner, a male prisoner, originally at Her Majesty's Prison, or His Majesty's Prison, Park, which is in Bridge End. Yeah. At the time, she was 23 years of age, and apparently, this particular inmate managed to persuade her how much she loved her. I've still got that bloody lump on my nose, haven't I? Managed to persuade her how much she loved her and was sending her completely inappropriate messages and discussing with her on his mobile phone, which he had secreted about his person in Manchester prison. That's Strange Ways. We all know about Strange Ways. And she was aware of this and did not report it. He was apparently sending her a message about how much he loved her and cared for her, and well, now she is where he is, behind bars. You see, the problem with this is that you start putting young ladies in positions like that, they're going to get themselves inappropriately associated with inmates, because that's what the inmates will do. I've seen grown men, experienced, mature men, be seduced and not sexually seduced, but seduced and manipulated by experienced long-term prisoners who set about, to twist them and to persuade them to do various things, such as smuggling in drugs, getting them mobile phones, taking them whiskey, because it wasn't mobile phones in my day, because they didn't actually have any, but to running bets. It's just ridiculous. I mean, once you get into that, once you do that, you're finished, because they've actually got you by the short and curlies. Believe me. I intervened once for a prisoner who was a great big gypsy. He was from gypsy. I think they were at Hattersley in Manchester. My brother knew them. He'd locked them up loads of times. But he was on a campsite, and his family were on a campsite. And whilst he was in prison, he'd been sentenced for. He was a bouncer in a club in Stockport, and somebody had got the wrong side of him, and he'd ejected them from the club. And then to just enforce his presence, he'd bitten their ears off. Seriously. It bit their ears off. And so I think he was doing 6 years or something like that for grievous bodily harm. And whilst he was in prison, a letter came through that his daughter had been involved in an accident on the campsite, because they lived on a gypsy campsite, and she'd been killed. And I had to read this letter to him. Of course, he was a great big hefty guy, only about the 1920 stone mark, but really hefty, And he looked completely distraught by this. So I intervened on his behalf. I made some telephone calls, but not to his family or friends. I contacted his solicitor. I got his record from the records office, went through it, found his solicitor's telephone number, and phoned his solicitor from the prison and asked him to contact the governor and request compassionate leave for this particular prisoner so that he could attend his daughter's funeral. The solicitor said to me, he said, "This is extremely unusual." He said, "I've been a solicitor for many years. I've never heard anything like this." I said, "I'm just telling you because I'm a nursing officer at Strangeways Prison, and this inmate is a patient on the hospital wing, and he's distraught by this. It's destroying him. But if you get him out on compassionate leave, he will get that from the governor. You mention my name if you will." And he said, "Absolutely, I will do this." Believe it or not, he was granted 5 days to go home and be with his family whilst they buried his daughter, and then he came back to prison. And he did come back to prison. I told him he was going. He didn't believe me. He just didn't speak to staff, shook his head like he didn't believe it. But sure enough, he was released unsupervised. He wasn't cuffed up. They let him out, and he went home, attended his daughter's funeral, and he came back. Do you know, when he came back, he was back into the hospital wing because he was suffering from problems with his diabetes. And when he came back, he looked at me, but he never said thanks. He never said, "Hey, thanks John," or "Thanks boss," or "Gov," or whatever. He never said thanks, just looked at me very strange, as if to say, "What on earth have you done this for?" I'd done it because it was an act of compassion, and I could seriously empathise with the man and his terrible situation. So that's the only time I've actually made telephone calls for a prisoner, but they ask and they offer you bribes. You know, go to this club, my girlfriend will meet you outside Boots's in middle of Manchester, and you know, you can she'll bring you some money, and all I've got to do, yeah, I'll tell you what I will do, get in your cell, lad, hey, I'll shut the door for you. That's the way to do it. But this poor lady, I actually feel sorry for her, yeah. Alicia Hibbs, aged 25. She looks a right fanny now, doesn't she, eh? Pissing around with some scumbag, yeah, who's manipulated her, put her in a position, lost her job. She's been struck off by the nursing council. She can no longer work as a nurse. She's in prison, so she'll do at least 3 months. And this scumbag, I believe he's in Strangeways at the moment because they moved him from HMP Park to Strangeways, which is called HMP Manchester, by the way. Which reminds me, yeah, I've got it here, folks. Yeah, don't forget, we've got to get this to number 1. It's HMP Manchester Prison Officer John G. Sutton. There's the name, yeah. That's my name. Anyway, I better warn you now. Ding dong ding. Yeah, but we're not going to have a poem. Not a song. We're going to have a poem. Yeah, a little bit of poetry. And this is about somebody who wore frilly underwear. You know, she was going on dating sites and putting advertisements in the newspaper to meet the man of her dreams. Good job she wasn't looking in prison, eh? Yeah. And this is called Frilly Ones. The idea was to meet a life partner, a man she could love and adore, so she joined a posh dating agency seeking GSOH and much more. In her notes, re herself, she was careful. All rugby, classics and art. Hinted at upmarket connections. Thought this would perhaps be a start. But Cupid kept missing his target. Useless, every damn man and jack. These bozos were not seeking marriage. Just wanted a roll in the sack. Then came Timothy, James Bowes Lyon, who said that his family were rich. They met by the Bookies in Oldham, where his dad had a spot, the Queen Pitch. Tim offered to take her to dinner, as much as our lady could eat, said he would be paying for supper, and this was his special treat. After soup of the day with the house red, and a portion of cold coq au vin, Timothy suggested some rhubarb, said it always worked well for him. The conversation was flagging. His grandfather paved Soho Square. Said his uncle had been shot by a Zulu. This was really going nowhere. So, seeking to brighten the moment, she offered her thoughts on the Tate. Tim stared in utter bemusement, looked at his watch, said, "Is it late?" Outside the black cabs kept passing, ignoring Tim's waving and hailing. She gazed in his eyes, gave one of those sighs, and then it started raining. Back at the bedsit in Hackney, he showed her his trophies, the lot. There were medals and shields from the jungle, and a spear from the man who got shot. Then he opened a bottle between them. It was Carver from Tesco's 2 cups. She just took a sip of the bubbly when Tim reached out for her pups. Now Tim's idea of foreplay amounted to jiggling her bust. She pushed him away, cursing the day, but he could not control his wild lust. As luck would have it, that evening, she dressed for a date with a swell. So as he slipped off her black number, Tim's eyes nearly popped. Bloody hell! She was wearing suspenders and frilly ones. Tim's heart beat so loud she could hear. As he stood by the doorway gasping, he jumped, missed, and fell on that spear. The Times obituary column spoke of a tragic mishap, of how his uncle's collection had put paid to Tim, the poor chap. It was weeks before she went dating. The memory of Tim was still near, and each time she slipped on her frilly ones, her mind went back to that spear. This tale, it does have a moral for ladies of all creeds and races. Beware of those black frilly undies. They can kill at 15 paces. Frilly Ones by John G. Sutton. Thank you very much. Don't forget, it's here, folks. You can't resist it. HMP Manchester Prison Officer John G. Sutton. It's me, the #1 best-selling book